I just showed you my ID.
Ma'am, step away from that bag.
I'm sorry, I'm checking out. Is something wrong?
You fit the description of a shoplifter. Let me see that receipt.
It's printing right now. Everything's been scanned.
Sure it has. Open the bag, now.
I'm a United States Marine. You don't want to regret doing this.
Oh, they're letting women call themselves Marines now. That's cute.
The self-checkout area was almost empty at 7:43 p.m. Just the beep of scanners and the mechanical voice repeating, "Please place item in bagging area." Rachel Bennett reached for the receipt as it printed. One item left to bag. A box of birthday candles shaped like tiny princesses. Tomorrow was Sophie's 6th birthday. She saw him in the reflection of the credit card reader. Police officer. 3 feet behind her, positioned to cut off the exit, his hand rested near his weapon. The next 18 minutes would be captured from 8 different angles by security cameras, so precise that every lie Officer Brian Walsh told would be immediately provable as false. Every word recorded with audio that made misinterpretation impossible. Every act of violence documented with clarity that destroyed any alternative story. What started as a grocery run for birthday supplies would become national news within 48 hours. The footage would reach over 3 million views in the first week. And Officer Brian Walsh would discover that some people, when pushed beyond breaking, don't just fight back. They dismantle your entire life with the precision of someone trained to defuse bombs in combat zones. Before we continue, drop your city or country in the comments. Hit subscribe because what happens next will leave you speechless. This became one of the clearest examples of racial and gender-based police abuse caught on camera, and the justice that followed changed how 14 cities handle misconduct complaints. Rachel Bennett wasn't someone who looked for fights. At 31, she'd spent 8 years deliberately walking toward danger so others wouldn't have to. Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, combat engineer with 2 deployments to Afghanistan. She'd defused IEDs on roads where one wrong move meant death. She'd earned a Purple Heart after shrapnel tore through her left leg, then demanded to return to duty because her unit was still deployed. She was also a single mother. Sophie's father had left during the pregnancy. Rachel raised Sophie alone, balancing deployments with help from family. She'd requested stateside assignment to be present for her daughter's childhood. She drove 20 minutes to the store because they carried the cake mix Sophie loved. Standing at checkout with a police officer approaching, Rachel felt time stretch the way it had in Kandahar when convoys hit IEDs. Her training took over. Assess threat, calculate distances, maintain calm, survive. Officer Brian Walsh was 43 with 15 years on the force. His personnel file told a story supervisors had ignored. 5 excessive force complaints from black residents, all dismissed. 3 reports of inappropriate conduct toward women, all filed away. A written warning for racial slurs, buried in his record. His colleagues whispered about patterns. Walsh didn't handle challenges well, especially from women. Black women who looked him in the eye. Women in uniform, police, military, security, jobs he believed women had no business doing. When he'd walked into Henderson's for coffee during patrol, he'd noticed Rachel immediately. Young black woman at self-checkout, moving with confidence. Something about how she carried herself triggered his instinct to investigate. People who belonged acted grateful. This woman moved like she owned the place. Rachel had caught his reflection in the card reader the moment he entered her space. She'd registered his badge number, his stance, the deliberate way he'd positioned himself to block her path. She'd made a tactical decision. Comply with everything, document verbally, give him no excuse. It wouldn't matter. Walsh's accusation was specific. He'd watched Rachel slip an item into her bag without scanning it. Complete fabrication, delivered with 15 years of badge authority. Rachel turned, voice calm. "The receipt is printing. Everything's been scanned. Would you like to see the screen?" She gestured toward the display showing her completed transaction. Walsh didn't look. His eyes stayed fixed on her face, searching for deference. When he didn't find it, something hardened. "Open the bag." Rachel set her bag on the counter and stepped back, hands visible. Everything in here was scanned and paid for. Walsh rifled through with deliberate roughness. Chocolate cake mix, pink frosting, princess candles, melting ice cream. A plastic Disney figurine Sophie had requested. The receipt showed every item, timestamps, barcodes, prices, payment confirmation. Finding nothing, Walsh shifted tactics. ID now. Rachel reached slowly for her back pocket, keeping her hands visible, moving in exaggerated slow motion to avoid any suggestion of threat. Walsh's hand moved instantly to his weapon. I said, keep your hands where I can see them. Rachel froze, hand halfway to her pocket. I'm getting my identification, like you asked. The contradiction was absurd. Walsh demanded ID, then threatened her for trying to provide it. This was the impossible trap black people faced constantly with police. Damned for complying, damned for not complying. After a long beat, Rachel finished reaching for her wallet, pulled out her driver's license, and extended it with fingers spread wide and visible. Walsh snatched it from her hand and examined it with theatrical scrutiny. You live 15 miles from here. Why'd you drive all this way to shop? The question dripped with implication, with the suggestion that her presence here required justification. This store carries specific products my daughter prefers for her birthday. Rachel kept her voice neutral, professional. Walsh wasn't satisfied. Where's the father? You got a husband? Invasive, inappropriate, absolutely none of his business. Rachel answered minimally, I'm a single parent. Sophie's father isn't in the picture. Walsh's smile was ugly, satisfied. Of course he isn't. Single mother out shopping instead of home with your kid. He leaned closer, voice dripping contempt. Maybe if you spent less time driving around and more time at home where you belong, you'd actually know what your kid needs without having to go all over town. Rachel felt heat flash through her chest, but discipline kept her face neutral. She'd dealt with sexism her entire military career. But standing in a grocery store buying birthday cake while a cop questioned her fitness as a parent, something inside her snapped. Her voice came out ice cold. I'm a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I've served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. Return my identification so I can complete my purchase and leave. Walsh's face flushed deep red. His entire body language transformed. You're what? Women playing soldier now? That what the Marines are doing? Maria Hernandez, 17 and working her first job, had been restocking plastic bags at the neighboring checkout. She froze mid-task, turning to watch. Something in the officer's tone made her stomach tighten. This wasn't right. Rachel kept her voice steady. I'm not playing anything. 8 years of service. I'd like my ID back so I can leave. Walsh held the license just out of reach. Petty, deliberate power move. 8 years doing what? Filing paperwork? Sitting at some desk on a base? Let me guess. You tell people you're combat military so they'll think you're tough. Think you're special. 2 aisles over, Patricia Ross had been pushing her cart toward checkout when she'd heard the raised voice. 72 years old, retired teacher, and she'd marched in Selma in 1965. She knew what police harassment sounded like. She stopped her cart and pulled out her phone. Her hands shook, not from fear but from recognition. This was the same hatred she'd witnessed 50 years ago, just wearing different clothes. Rachel's jaw tightened. Combat engineer. 2 deployments to Afghanistan. I defused improvised explosive devices and cleared convoy routes under hostile fire. Now give me my identification so I can leave. Walsh stepped closer, deliberately invading her space in a way that made his intent unmistakable. This wasn't about verifying identity anymore. This was about dominance. About putting this woman in what he believed was her proper place. Know what I think? His voice carried clearly now, projecting to the growing audience. Tyler Mills and his girlfriend Jessica, both law students, had just entered the self-checkout area and immediately sensed the confrontation. Tyler knew what probable cause meant. He knew this stop was illegal from the first sentence. His hand moved to his phone. You're exactly the type who makes up stories for attention. Got some admin job somewhere? Tell everyone you're hero this and combat that, when really you're just another woman who can't handle the truth about herself. Officer. A new voice cut through the tension. Calm but firm. David Torres had emerged from the back offices, drawn by Maria's text. Cop harassing customer at checkout. Please come. David was 38, former Army sergeant with a deployment to Iraq under his belt. When he took in the scene, customer pressed against counter, officer in aggressive stance, birthday supplies scattered across the checkout area. Other shoppers watching with alarm. His expression shifted from concern to recognition. He'd seen this before. He knew exactly what this was. Is there a problem here? Walsh spun toward the manager, his demeanor instantly shifting to professional courtesy. Just verifying a purchase. Customer was acting suspiciously. Rachel's voice cut through, addressing David directly. I scanned and paid for everything. The receipt is right there showing all my items with timestamps. This officer accused me of theft with absolutely no evidence, and when I provided identification and explained I'm active-duty military, he began making inappropriate comments about my service and my daughter. David looked at the counter. Birthday cake supplies lined up. Receipt clearly displaying each item with barcode confirmation. Self-checkout screen still showing her completed, paid transaction. He recognized Rachel. She shopped here twice a week, always polite. Then he looked at Walsh and saw a cop who decided to harass someone for no legitimate reason. Ma'am, I apologize for this. David's tone was professional but his meaning crystal clear. Your transaction is complete and valid. Officer, unless there's an actual crime being reported, I need to ask you to let this customer complete her shopping and leave. It was a dismissal. Polite but unmistakable. A civilian manager telling a police officer his presence wasn't needed. Walsh's face went from red to nearly purple. She fits the description of a shoplifter we've had multiple reports about. I have reasonable suspicion to detain her for investigation. Rachel's response was immediate, logic cutting through his fabrication. What description, specifically? What reports? You approached me before I'd even finished my transaction. How could I fit a description when you hadn't seen me complete a purchase yet? The hole in his story was obvious. Walsh's face reddened as he realized his justification was falling apart in real time. So he did what officers like him always did when cornered. He escalated to physical control. His hand moved to the handcuffs on his belt. You're being detained for investigation of retail theft. Turn around. Place your hands behind your back. Now. Rachel made a decision in that heartbeat. She could refuse, cite the obvious lack of probable cause, risk this becoming a physical confrontation where his word would carry weight against hers. Or she could comply while creating an undeniable verbal record. She raised her voice, speaking clearly for anyone listening. I am not resisting. I am complying under protest. I have committed no crime. There is no probable cause for this detention. I do not consent to this arrest. She turned slowly, every movement deliberate and visible, and placed her hands behind her back. Walsh's fingers clamped around her left wrist, the wrist she'd placed behind her back exactly as he'd ordered, with immediate, brutal force. Not the controlled grip of a professional arrest. This was designed to hurt. He wrenched her arm upward and twisted her wrist inward, punishing her for compliance. Her shoulder joint popped audibly, a sharp crack that carried across the store. Patricia flinched behind her phone, nearly dropping it. The sound was sickening, unmistakable. Rachel's breath caught. Not a scream, just a sharp intake she couldn't suppress. Pain radiated from her wrist through her forearm, up into her shoulder. Ice cream was melting into a puddle on the counter, chocolate cake mix knocked on its side, princess candles scattered, birthday party supplies for a 6-year-old inches from where a cop was deliberately inflicting pain on her mother. Hey! Maria's voice cracked from nearby, 17 years old and scared but unable to stay silent. You're hurting her. She's not fighting you. Patricia's phone was already recording, capturing the assault from 15 feet away. Her hands trembled, but the camera stayed steady. Tyler had his phone out too, standing at an angle that caught Walsh's face clearly. That's assault, he called out, loud enough for Jessica's camera to pick up his voice. We're recording everything. This is assault. Walsh released Rachel's wrist with a shove and spun toward David, his face contorted with rage. You want to interfere with a police investigation? You want to be arrested for obstruction? Rachel cradled her wrist against her chest. It was already swelling, angry red marks blooming where Walsh's fingers had dug in with deliberate pressure. She kept her voice steady despite the throbbing pain. I need your badge number and full name. I'm filing formal complaints for assault, false arrest, and civil rights violations. Walsh's laugh was harsh, contemptuous. You're filing a complaint? You just assaulted a police officer by pulling away during a lawful arrest. I didn't pull away. Rachel's Marine Corps training kept her voice level, clear, projecting. You released my wrist to threaten the store manager. and there are cameras recording every second of what you've done here. The word hung in the air between them. Cameras. If this is making you angry, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button right now, because the next part, where those cameras destroy his entire defense, is going to be satisfying. Don't miss what happens when he realizes he's been caught. For 3 seconds, the only sound in the self-checkout area was the mechanical beep of a scanner 2 aisles over. David Torres pulled out his tablet. "Officer Walsh, before this goes any further, there's something you need to see." He navigated to the store's transaction system, pulled up Rachel's checkout from 8 minutes earlier, turned the screen toward Walsh. Digital record of Sergeant Bennett's purchase. Timestamp 7:41 p.m. 8 items scanned. David's screen showed each item with painful clarity. Cake mix, frosting, birthday candles. Everything for a 6-year-old's party. Everything Walsh had claimed she stole. Total, $24.67. Credit card ending in 4492. Transaction approved at 7:42 p.m. Every item listed here with barcode and price matches exactly what's sitting on that counter right now. Walsh glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened. "It proves you lied," Rachel said quietly. "You claimed you watched me steal something. The transaction record proves I scanned and paid for everything. You had no legitimate reason to stop me, no probable cause to detain me, no justification for what you just did to my wrist." Maria stepped forward, her teenage voice shaking but determined. "I saw the whole thing from over there. She scanned every single item." He just walked up out of nowhere and started accusing her. Patricia spoke up, phone still recording. "I've been filming for 6 minutes. I have video of you grabbing her wrist, twisting it deliberately. I heard her shoulder pop from here. And I have you threatening the manager when he tried to help. All of it's on my phone." Walsh's expression was changing, the absolute confidence draining away as he calculated the situation. Transaction records contradicting his accusation. Multiple witnesses, video evidence from civilians, his story crumbling in real time. David wasn't finished. He'd learned in Iraq that superior firepower wins fights. Right now, his firepower was evidence Walsh couldn't dispute. "Officer, there's one more thing you need to understand." He pointed upward. Walsh's eyes followed to small black domes positioned throughout the ceiling. Security cameras he'd been too focused on his target to notice. "Henderson's upgraded our entire security system 3 months ago. 8 cameras in this section. High-definition video with audio. Cloud storage uploading real-time to off-site servers. Those cameras recorded everything you just did." The color drained from Walsh's face. His hand, which had been resting confidently on his belt, dropped to his side. His shoulders hunched slightly, a man suddenly aware he was surrounded. Eyes darting from camera to camera, then back to David's tablet showing the transaction record that proved his first lie. Then to the witnesses he'd been too arrogant to worry about. A new voice joined the conversation. "Excuse me, is there a problem here?" A woman in her 40s had approached from the produce section, drawn by the obvious commotion. She wore a military spouse ID on a lanyard, the kind issued to families of active duty service members. Her eyes took in Rachel's bearing, the way she held herself despite obvious pain, the disciplined posture and recognition flickered across her face. "Ma'am, this is police business," Walsh tried, but the words came out weak. The woman looked at Rachel. The controlled breathing despite injury, the way she tracked everyone's positions with tactical awareness and knew exactly what she was seeing. "This is a Marine being harassed in a grocery store. I'm Stephanie Grant. My husband is Major Grant at Camp Lejeune." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "I'm standing right here as a witness to whatever happens next, and I'll be making a full report to base command." Walsh was surrounded now, store manager with transaction records proving he'd lied. Teenage employee who'd watched from the beginning. Retired teacher, recording on her phone with hands that had held cameras at civil rights marches in the 60s. Law student and his girlfriend filming from multiple angles. Military spouse ready to escalate this to base command. And Rachel Bennett, standing calm and composed despite her swelling wrist, waiting for him to make his next move. Rachel's voice cut through the heavy silence. "Badge number. Full name, give them to me right now, or I'm calling 911 to report a police officer assaulting a civilian." The words came out barely audible, mumbled toward the floor. 4729, Walsh. Louder. Not a request. A command delivered in the same tone Walsh had used on her minutes earlier. Walsh's face flushed, then went pale. Officer Brian Walsh. Badge number 4729. Maria immediately grabbed a receipt and wrote it down, her handwriting careful and deliberate. Patricia made sure her phone recording captured him saying it clearly, speaking the numbers aloud herself to create redundant audio confirmation. Stephanie entered it into her phone's notes app. Tyler repeated it for his video's audio track. Multiple independent records, impossible for anyone to make disappear later. David Torres made his final move, speaking loud enough for all the cameras to capture every word. Sergeant Bennett, on behalf of Henderson's Supermarket, I apologize that you were subjected to harassment and assault in our store. I'm preserving all security footage from the last 30 minutes, and I will personally ensure copies are available for any investigation you choose to pursue. I'm also documenting this in our corporate incident system as a customer safety issue involving law enforcement misconduct. He turned to Walsh. Officer, I'm asking you to leave the premises immediately. You've disrupted our business, harassed a valued customer without any legitimate cause, and committed what appears to be assault on our property. You are no longer welcome in this store. If you refuse to leave, I will contact your department and request another officer be sent to escort you out. It was stunning. A civilian manager ordering a police officer to leave, but Walsh, surrounded by evidence and witnesses, cornered by his own lies, had no move left. He tried one last desperate attempt to salvage some authority. This isn't over. I'll be filing my own report about her behavior, about her refusing to cooperate with. Please do, Rachel interrupted, her voice calm but edged with steel. Make sure your report includes the part where you falsely accused me of theft that transaction records prove didn't happen. Include the part where you assaulted me while I was complying with every order you gave. Include the part where you said women are just playing soldier, and that people like me need to learn our place. Include that you people think a uniform makes you equal. I want every single word you said in your official report, so there's no confusion later about what actually happened. Walsh's mouth opened and closed. His face cycled through red to white to red again. He looked around at the cameras, the phones, the witnesses, the transaction records on David's tablet, and seemed to understand, finally completely, that this time there was no way out. He turned and walked toward the exit, trying to maintain some shred of dignity, trying to look like he was leaving by choice. But his shoulders were hunched, his hand had dropped from his belt, and everyone watching knew exactly what they'd just witnessed. A bully exposed, an abuser caught. A system that usually protected officers like him failing because this time there was simply too much evidence to ignore. The automatic doors hissed shut behind him. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Just the faint hum of refrigerators and the knowledge that they'd all just witnessed something that would change everything. The silence broke when Rachel's composure finally cracked slightly. Her hand went to her wrist, cradling it gently. The adrenaline that had kept her voice steady and her mind sharp was beginning to fade, replaced by the shaky aftermath and the deep, throbbing ache. Stephanie was at her side immediately. You need to get that looked at right now, and you need to report this to your command at Lejeune. When local police assault active-duty Marines, the Corps takes that very seriously. Trust me, my husband will make sure this goes straight to the colonel. David was already moving, phone in one hand. I'm calling paramedics to document your injuries. Medical records are crucial for prosecution. And I'm downloading all the camera footage right now. You'll have copies on a USB drive before you leave tonight. Maria appeared with ice wrapped in a clean towel, tears running down her face. Kier, I'm so sorry this happened. Patricia approached, phone still in her hand. I'll send you my recording right now. Give me your email. You're going to want copies from multiple sources. The box of princess candles lay on the counter next to Rachel's swelling wrist. Tomorrow was Sophie's 6th birthday. Rachel had promised homemade cake with pink frosting. More shoppers who'd watched the confrontation began gathering, offering to provide written statements, exchanging contact information, expressing shock and support. Sophie's going to get her princess cake, Stephanie said firmly, reading Rachel's expression. I'll help you finish shopping after we take care of this, but first, we document everything. The paramedics arrived within 12 minutes. They photographed Rachel's wrist from multiple angles, the swelling already pronounced, bruising beginning to form in the distinct pattern of fingerprints where Walsh had gripped and deliberately twisted. They documented her description of the injury mechanism. Deliberate application of force beyond any reasonable need for control, applied to a fully compliant individual. While they worked, David returned with a USB drive. 8 camera angles. 30 minutes of footage starting from when you entered the parking lot. Audio is crystal clear. You can hear every word he said. Patricia sent her phone recording to Rachel's email. Maria filled out a witness statement on store letterhead. Stephanie made calls. First to her husband at the base, who immediately escalated to the Judge Advocate General's office. Then to a friend who was a civil rights attorney. Within an hour, Rachel had offers of legal representation from 3 different lawyers. Rachel chose Lisa Montgomery, a black woman who'd built her career on police misconduct cases. After reviewing the security footage, Lisa said just 3 words: "We destroy him." Patricia posted her recording to Facebook, tagging news stations and civil rights groups. By midnight, 8,000 shares. Maria posted to TikTok, "Cop assaults Marine for buying birthday cake." 100,000 views by morning. Stephanie's husband sent the incident report through military channels to the base commander, who contacted the mayor and police chief. Address this immediately, or the Corps will. Local news picked it up by morning. National news that afternoon. Justice for Rachel trended. Veterans groups mobilized. Marines especially, furious one of their own had been assaulted shopping for her daughter's birthday. Walsh's department tried their standard response: administrative leave, internal investigation. But this time was different. The evidence was too clear, the pressure too intense. 3 days after the incident, Brian Walsh was fired from the police department. Not suspended, fired. His law enforcement certification was suspended by the state board. Fired was just the beginning. If you want to see what happened when this case went to trial, when a jury watched that footage and heard those audio recordings, make sure you're subscribed. The courtroom moment is coming, and it's worth seeing. District Attorney Patricia Lewis filed criminal charges within a week. Assault under color of authority, official misconduct, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations. The trial 6 months later was one of the most one-sided proceedings the county courthouse had seen in years. The prosecution presented the security footage from 8 different angles. Walsh approaching Rachel without cause, accusing her of theft, ignoring the transaction records proving she'd paid, making sexist comments about women playing soldier, grabbing her wrist and twisting it with visible, deliberate force while she remained completely compliant. They played the audio recording of him saying, "Women playing soldier," and "You people think a uniform makes you equal." They presented medical evidence showing bruising consistent with deliberate pain infliction, photographs matching the grip visible in the security footage. Rachel testified in her dress blues, rows of ribbons on her chest including the Purple Heart. She described her service calmly and professionally. She described what happened in the grocery store with the same composure she'd shown that night, answering every question directly, never raising her voice. Walsh's defense collapsed when even his own attorney seemed to realize he had nothing to work with. He tried arguing Walsh had felt threatened by Rachel's demeanor. The prosecution played footage showing a woman in a black t-shirt calmly scanning birthday cake supplies, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who just wanted to get home to her daughter. No threatening gestures, no aggressive posture. He tried arguing Walsh had reasonable suspicion of theft based on her behavior. The prosecution presented transaction records showing every item scanned with individual timestamps, proving Walsh had approached her before she'd even finished checking out, before he could possibly have observed any completed action to justify suspicion. He tried claiming Rachel had resisted the arrest, creating officer safety concerns requiring physical force. The prosecution played audio of her voice, clear and steady, stating for the cameras, "I am not resisting, I am complying under protest. I have committed no crime." Then they played medical testimony about injuries consistent with deliberate pain infliction, not reasonable force. Use of force experts testified there was zero justification for the technique Walsh had used on someone who was offering no resistance whatsoever. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. They returned guilty verdicts on all charges. Judge Victoria Hughes, a black woman and former Navy officer who'd spent 20 years on the bench, held nothing back during sentencing. Officer Walsh, you targeted Sergeant Bennett because of her race and her gender. You assaulted her not because she posed any threat, but because she refused to show you the deference you believed you were entitled to. You lied repeatedly because you believed, as you had for 15 years, that your badge would protect you from consequences. You were wrong. She sentenced him to 5 years in state prison, the maximum penalty allowed under sentencing guidelines. The courtroom erupted in applause. The civil lawsuit Lisa Montgomery filed was equally devastating. She sued Walsh personally and the city for maintaining a pattern and practice of ignoring complaints that had allowed Walsh to abuse people for 15 years. Discovery revealed internal emails showing supervisors discussing Walsh's overly aggressive approach and complaints about his treatment of women and minorities, followed by decisions not to discipline him because the union will fight it. The city settled for $2.8 million rather than expose all of that in open court. But the settlement required comprehensive policy changes, an independent civilian oversight board with real investigative power, mandatory training in implicit bias, and de-escalation for every officer, an early warning system to identify officers with patterns of complaints, and a public database of all use of force incidents. Rachel used the settlement money to establish the SHIELD Foundation, providing free legal representation for military service members and veterans facing discrimination or police misconduct. She partnered with Lisa Montgomery to create a rapid response network. Any veteran anywhere in the state who experienced police harassment could call a hotline and have access to an attorney within 24 hours. The foundation also created training programs, teaching veterans about their rights during police encounters, and successfully lobbied for state legislation making it a felony to assault active duty military or veterans in retaliation for their service. Patricia Ross became a community activist, teaching workshops at senior centers about how to safely record police encounters. Maria Hernandez graduated high school and went to college for criminal justice, determined to become the kind of officer Walsh should have been. David Torres was promoted to regional manager, and his security camera system became standard across every Henderson's location in the country. Brian Walsh served 4 years before being released on parole. No law enforcement agency would hire him. He left North Carolina, moved to another state, found work in manual labor. His name was permanently attached to this case, studied in police academies across the country as an example of how racial and gender bias, unchecked for too long, destroys careers and ruins lives. Rachel eventually transitioned out of active duty with the Marines, not because of what Walsh had done to her, but because she'd found a new mission. The SHIELD Foundation became her full-time work, traveling the country to train veterans, speak to police departments about unconscious bias, and lobby for legislative changes. She'd spent 8 years protecting Americans from enemies abroad. Now she protected veterans from enemies at home. People who wore badges but didn't honor what those badges were supposed to represent. Sophie got her birthday cake, by the way. Stephanie helped Rachel finish shopping that night after the paramedics left and the footage was preserved. The next day, Sophie had her princess party at their small apartment. She blew out 6 candles shaped like tiny crowns, laughed with her friends, asked why Mommy's wrist was wrapped in a bandage. "Just a little accident, baby," Rachel said, kissing her forehead while holding her close with her good arm. "Nothing you need to worry about." She'd spent 8 years protecting strangers in a war zone. She could protect her daughter from this particular truth a little longer. Some burdens, Rachel decided, children shouldn't have to carry. Let Sophie be 6. Let her have birthday cake and princess parties and the kind of childhood where police officers are helpers, not threats. There would be time enough later to explain the complicated truth about the world. What happened to Rachel happens to black women every day across this country. The assumption they don't belong. The demand they justify their presence. The violence when they refuse to be diminished. The system that protects their abusers. But this time, something broke differently. A 17-year-old working her first job chose courage over silence when she could have looked away. A 72-year-old woman who'd marched for civil rights in the 1960s chose to record instead of walking past. A store manager chose evidence and accountability over the easier path of neutrality. A Marine sergeant chose to fight for justice instead of accepting that this is how the world works. And because of those choices, Brian Walsh is in prison instead of still carrying a badge. 14 cities changed their police accountability policies because of this case. The Shield Foundation has helped over 200 veterans fight back against the next Walsh, 12 of them against the same department that had employed him, in cases that finally forced the chief who'd protected him for 15 years to resign in disgrace. The system didn't save Rachel. People did. Cameras captured truth because a manager chose to preserve evidence. Justice happened because witnesses refused to be silent. Change occurred because ordinary citizens decided that what they'd witnessed was intolerable and they had the power to do something about it. Rachel went from protecting her country on foreign battlefields to protecting her fellow veterans from threats they never trained for, the ones wearing badges who abuse authority instead of honoring it. If this made you angry, that's appropriate. Share it. Let people know this happened, that it keeps happening, and that sometimes, when citizens refuse to be bystanders, even broken systems can deliver justice. What do you think should happen to officers like Walsh? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice actually working made an impact on you, subscribe to see more cases like this. We cover stories where evidence, witnesses, and determination lead to real accountability. The next case might be even more intense than Rachel's. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it.